My son stood up at my 68th birthday dinner, tapped his wine glass with a spoon, and told our entire family he was sending me to a nursing home. The sound cut through the chatter like a blade. 23 people fell silent around my dining room table, the table I'd spent all morning setting with my good china, the plates with the delicate blue trim I'd been collecting for 30 years. The pot roast I'd been basting since dawn sat steaming in the center, surrounded by roasted carrots and potatoes, still glistening with butter and herbs. Daniel cleared his throat, his hand resting on his wife Ashley's shoulder. He'd rehearsed this. I could see it in the way he avoided my eyes, focusing instead on a spot just above my sister Margaret's head. "I know this isn't easy to hear," he began, his voice taking on that practiced, sympathetic tone he used with difficult clients. "But Ashley and I have been talking, and we think it's time Mom moves somewhere she can get proper care. Somewhere safe. Somewhere with people trained to handle—" He paused, manufactured a difficult swallow. "Her declining condition." My sister Margaret nodded solemnly, her expression arranged into concern. My daughter-in-law Ashley dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, though I noticed no actual tears. Around the table, faces turned toward me, waiting for the reaction they expected. Shock, denial, maybe tears. Probably a scene. I took a sip of water and set the glass down gently. The silence stretched. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "before we continue this conversation, I'd like everyone to look at the folder placed beside your dinner plate." Daniel's confident expression flickered. Just for a second. "What folder?" "The manila folders," I repeated calmly, gesturing around the table. "I put one at each seat before you arrived. Please, everyone, open them." The rustle of paper filled my dining room. I watched faces change as they read. My brother Tom, who'd flown in from Seattle at my request, already knew what was inside. He sat back, arms crossed, watching Daniel with an expression I'd never seen him wear before. My nephew Marcus whispered, "Holy shit." His mother, my sister-in-law Elena, the one who's a family court judge, had gone very still, her eyes moving rapidly across the pages. Daniel's face drained of color. Ashley's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "What is this?" Daniel's voice had climbed an octave. "What did you do?" "I documented the truth," I replied. "Every conversation, every bank withdrawal you thought I didn't notice. Every time you moved things in my house and told me I'd forgotten where I put them. It's all there, with dates, times, and in some cases, video evidence." "Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. My name is Eleanor Price, and I need to tell you this story. Not because it's easy, but because I know some of you might be living through something similar right now. Maybe you've felt that creeping doubt when a family member says you're not remembering things right. Maybe you've noticed money going missing and been told you already spent it. If that's you, I need you to hear what happened to me. I spent 35 years as a high school math teacher and another 15 doing bookkeeping for small businesses after I retired from teaching. Numbers are my language. Details are my specialty. Organization is how I survived raising a child alone after my husband died. Those skills saved my life. Before we go any further, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. It helps me feel less alone in this, knowing you're out there listening. What I'm about to tell you is the story of how my own son, the boy I worked 3 jobs to put through college, tried to steal everything from me. My home, my savings, my independence, my identity. He didn't do it with violence or obvious theft. He did it with paperwork and concern and carefully constructed lies about my mental state. He tried to erase me while I was still alive. But I'm a teacher. And teachers? We do our homework. The dinner you just witnessed was 6 months in the making. 6 months of discovery, documentation, and preparation. 6 months of living with the knowledge that the person I loved most in this world saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to a $400,000 real estate transaction. That folder contained proof of every single thing he did. But to understand why I was so prepared that night, I need to take you back 6 months, to the day I discovered what my son really thought of me. Daniel was 8 years old when his father collapsed in our kitchen from a brain aneurysm. One moment, Robert was laughing at something our son had said, reaching for the coffee pot, and the next he was on the floor. He died before the ambulance arrived. I remember Daniel standing in the doorway in his Batman pajamas, watching the paramedics work, not understanding that his whole world had just changed. Mine had too. Robert's life insurance was enough to bury him and cover 3 months of mortgage payments. After that, I was on my own with a traumatized second grader and a house payment I could barely afford on a teacher's salary. So I did what you do. I worked. I taught high school algebra Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 3:30. Then I'd pick up Daniel from the after-school program, help him with homework, make dinner, and after he went to bed, I'd sit at our kitchen table doing bookkeeping for local businesses, tax preparation during tax season, payroll processing year-round. Sometimes I'd still be working at midnight, calculator clicking softly while Daniel slept down the hall. Weekends, I tutored kids who were failing math. $20 an hour, cash, every penny counted. Daniel never went without. He had new shoes when he needed them, birthday parties with his friends, the class trip to Washington, D.C. in 8th grade. When he wanted to play soccer, I found a way to pay the league fees. When he made the varsity team and needed special cleats, I picked up an extra bookkeeping client. He was my purpose. My entire world condensed down to one simple mission: make sure my son had every opportunity his father's death had tried to take from him. I watched him grow from that frightened 8-year-old into someone I was desperately proud of. He was kind, that's what I remember most. In high school, he noticed the kids who sat alone at lunch. He'd include them, just casually, like it was nothing. He got his father's easy laugh and his mother's work ethic. He studied hard, made decent grades, got into state university on a partial scholarship. I paid the rest, every semester. The money I'd been saving for a new roof went to his dorm fees. The vacation I'd never taken funded his textbooks. When he graduated with a business degree and got his real estate license, I cried watching him walk across that stage. I'd done it. I'd gotten him there. He met Ashley at an open house. She was a dental hygienist looking for her first condo. He sold her a place in Midtown and apparently sold himself in the process. She seemed sweet enough when he brought her to Sunday dinner. Quiet, pretty. She complimented my pot roast, asked polite questions about my teaching career. They married 5 years ago in a ceremony I helped pay for. Not the whole thing, but enough. The flowers, part of the catering. Daniel didn't ask, but I saw Ashley's Pinterest board of wedding dreams and I knew what real estate agents make in their first few years. I wanted to help. Then the grandchildren came. First Emma, then 2 years later, Jackson. I was 63 when Emma was born, and holding that baby, I felt like I understood what all those years of sacrifice had been for. This, legacy, family, continuation. Sunday dinners became sacred. Every week, Daniel would pull up in his silver Lexus, Ashley in the passenger seat, the kids bouncing in their car seats. Emma would run straight to my garden to check on the tomatoes we'd planted together. Jackson, still toddling and unsteady, would make a beeline for the toy box I kept in the living room just for him. The house would fill with noise and life. Cartoons playing in the background. Emma's stories about preschool. The smell of my pot roast in the oven, the one I'd been making the same way for 40 years. The one Robert had loved. The one Daniel requested every week. Carrots and potatoes and onions, slow cooked until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. Daniel's laugh still sounded like his father's. That same sudden burst of sound, genuine and full. Every time I heard it, something in my chest would tighten and release at the same time. Grief and joy occupying the same space. I'd bought this house 15 years ago, right before I retired from teaching. Nothing fancy. A small 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood with good bones and a yard big enough for a garden. I'd saved for years, worked those bookkeeping jobs long after I could have stopped, just to make sure I could pay cash. No mortgage. No one could take it from me. It was mine. Fully, completely mine. I'd sit on my back porch on Saturday mornings with my coffee, looking at my garden, at the bird feeder I'd hung from the oak tree, at the swing set Daniel and Ashley had bought me so the grandkids would have something to play on. I'd think I did it. I survived the worst thing that could happen, and I built this life anyway. At 68, I was living exactly the retirement I'd planned. Teacher's pension, Social Security, the savings I'd carefully accumulated over decades of careful budgeting. No debt, no drama, just peace, and Sunday dinners and grandchildren who ran to me with open arms. I thought I knew my son. I thought the man I raised would never put money before his mother. I was wrong. The first crack appeared on a Sunday in late March, disguised as a compliment. Ashley stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where Daniel was pushing Emma on the swing. The afternoon light caught the dust motes floating between us, and I was pulling the pot roast from the oven when she said, "You know, Eleanor, this house is really worth a fortune now. Have you seen what places in this neighborhood are selling for?" I set the roasting pan on the stovetop, the meat still sizzling. "I haven't really looked. Daniel pulled some comps last week. You wouldn't believe it. Houses on this street are going for close to 400,000. She turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Seems like a lot of house for one person to manage." Something in my stomach tightened, but I brushed it off. She was making conversation, that's all. "I like my space," I said lightly, "and the kids need room to play when they visit." She nodded, but the comment lingered in the air like smoke. 2 weeks later, Daniel brought it up during dinner. We were eating at my dining room table, the same table where everything would eventually fall apart, and he said, "Mom, have you thought about what you want to do long term? With the house, I mean." I looked up from cutting Jackson's pot roast into smaller pieces. "Do with it. It's just a lot of maintenance for someone your age. The yard, the gutters, the roof's going to need replacing soon." He said it casually, reaching for the salt. "Ashley and I were thinking you might be happier somewhere smaller. A condo, maybe. One of those nice 55-plus communities with activities and people your own age. I'm 68, not 88, and I like my neighbors just fine." Of course, of course." He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just something to think about. Simplifying, less stress." But I hadn't said I was stressed. The comments multiplied like cracks in a windshield. "Mom, didn't you already tell me that story?" When I hadn't. "Are you sure you took your blood pressure medication today?" When I'd watched myself take it that morning. "You seem tired lately. Are you sleeping okay?" Each one was small, meaningless on its own, but they started to accumulate, a weight I couldn't quite name. Then came the day Ashley offered to help organize my paperwork. She'd arrived early for Sunday dinner, before Daniel and the kids. I was in the kitchen prepping vegetables when she wandered toward my small home office. "Eleanor, when's the last time you went through all this?" She gestured at my filing cabinet. "I bet there's stuff in here from 10 years ago you don't need anymore. I could help you sort it. You know, make sure everything's current. Your insurance documents, your will, all that." My hand stilled on the carrot I was peeling. "I keep very organized files, Ashley. Everything's current." "I'm sure you do. I just meant, wouldn't it be nice to have help?" At a certain point, managing all this financial stuff gets overwhelming. I'd been managing financial documents since before she was born. I'd done payroll for businesses with 50 employees. I'd prepared tax returns so complex they required 3 separate schedules. "I'm fine," I said, more sharply than I intended. She backed off, but I noticed her eyes lingering on my desk, on the folders clearly labeled in my precise handwriting: insurance, banking, investments, property deed. I should have paid attention to that look. The real break came 3 weeks later on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Daniel had stopped by to drop off Emma. Ashley had a dental conference and he had showings all day. Could I watch her? Of course I could. I'd canceled my library book club, delighted to have the extra time with my granddaughter. Emma was in the living room watching Bluey. I was in the kitchen starting cookies when I heard Daniel's voice from my back porch. He'd stepped outside to take a call, and my kitchen window was open to let in the spring air. "No, she hasn't mentioned anything about selling." His voice carried clearly through the screen. "But she will. We just have to be patient." I froze, my hand halfway to the flour canister. "I know the market's good right now," he continued, "but if we push too hard, she'll dig in. You know how she gets—" "Yeah, exactly. We plant the seeds, let her think it's her idea. Once we get the house, we can flip it for at least 400,000. After commission and closing costs, we're still looking at a significant—" I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. Emma called from the living room. "Grandma, can we make chocolate chip?" "Yes, sweetie," I managed, my voice sounding distant in my own ears. "Chocolate chip." Daniel came back inside a moment later, all smiles. "Thanks again for watching her, Mom. You're a lifesaver." I mixed cookie dough with my granddaughter, while my son sat at my table scrolling through his phone, and I told myself I'd misheard, misunderstood. He was talking about a client's house, an investment property, something else, anything else. But 35 years of teaching teenagers had taught me to recognize a lie, even when I desperately wanted to believe it. And 15 years of bookkeeping had taught me something even more valuable. When the numbers don't add up, someone's cooking the books. That night, after they'd gone home with a container of cookies, I sat at my kitchen table in the growing dark and tried to make sense of what I'd heard. Once we get the house. Not if. Once. I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood. But then I found the brochure hidden in my own kitchen drawer. I found the brochure 3 days later, tucked behind my dish towels in the drawer next to my sink. I was putting away clean laundry when my hand brushed against something that didn't belong. Glossy paper, thick and expensive. I pulled it out and stared at the cover. Sunset Gardens Assisted Living. A photo of elderly people playing checkers, all of them smiling too widely, their happiness as manufactured as the staged sunlight streaming through the windows behind them. My hands started shaking. I opened the brochure on my kitchen counter. Someone had folded it to a specific page, the memory care unit. Specialized support for residents with cognitive decline. 24-hour supervision. Secure facilities to prevent wandering. There was an application tucked inside, partially filled out. The handwriting was Daniel's. I'd know it anywhere. I'd checked his homework for 10 years. Patient name, Eleanor Marie Price. Date of birth, correct. Current medications. He'd listed my blood pressure prescription and added various supplements for memory support that I'd never taken. Reason for placement inquiry, increasing confusion and inability to manage daily tasks safely. I read that line 3 times. Increasing confusion. Inability to manage daily tasks. I'd balanced my checkbook to the penny 2 days ago. I'd done the Sunday crossword in ink. I'd organized my tax documents from my accountant. Every receipt categorized and dated. The room tilted slightly, and I gripped the counter. When had he been in this drawer? When had he stood in my kitchen, in my house, filling out paperwork to have me committed to a memory care facility, and then hidden it among my dish towels like a dirty secret? I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think. If he'd filled out an application, what else had he done? I walked to my home office, and that's when I noticed it. My laptop was closed. I never closed my laptop. I left it open on my desk, sleeping but accessible. It was a habit from my bookkeeping days, always ready to pull up a file, check a number, send a quick email. Someone had closed it. I opened it and checked my browser history. The most recent searches weren't mine. How to get power of attorney for elderly parent. Declaring someone mentally incompetent in Georgia. Conservatorship process. Early signs of dementia versus normal aging. Each search was dated and time-stamped, last Sunday between 2:15 and 2:40 p.m. during dinner. While I'd been in the kitchen cleaning up, Daniel had been in here, on my computer, researching how to take away my rights. My professional training kicked in like muscle memory. I opened a new document and started typing. Date, time, evidence found. I took photos of the browser history with my phone. I photographed the brochure front and back with special attention to Daniel's handwriting on the application. I noted the dates, the times, the location where I'd found it. Then I started looking closer, at everything. The stack of mail on my desk had been disturbed. I keep my mail in a specific order. Bills on the left, personal correspondence on the right, junk in the recycling bin. Someone had gone through it and put it back wrong. My filing cabinet drawer wasn't fully closed. I'm meticulous about closing drawers, another old habit from teaching. Don't leave drawers open. Someone could trip. I checked my files. My property deed had been pulled and replaced slightly out of order. My insurance documents had been removed and returned to the wrong folder. Someone had been conducting an inventory of my assets. I walked back to the kitchen and checked my purse, which I always left on the counter by the door. I opened my wallet and counted the cash inside. I keep $100 in 20s for emergencies, always. I've done it for years, an old habit from a time when ATMs weren't on every corner. There was $60. I checked the zippered pocket where I keep receipts. Empty. I always had receipts, from the grocery store, the pharmacy, the gas station. I kept them to track my spending, to reconcile against my bank statements at the end of each month. All gone. And then I saw them, scattered across my kitchen table, like someone had been reading over breakfast. Printed articles. 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. When is it time for assisted living? How to talk to your parent about memory loss. I hadn't printed these. I hadn't even looked these up. But someone wanted me to find them. Someone wanted me to start doubting myself, to wonder if maybe they were right. If maybe I was forgetting things, misplacing things, losing track. It was gaslighting, textbook, and calculated. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy against my own competence, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't concern. This was a campaign. They were building a case, planting evidence, creating a narrative of an old woman who couldn't manage her own life, who needed someone to step in and take control. And once they had control, they'd have my house, my savings, everything I'd spent 40 years building. I had two choices. I could confront Daniel right now. Call him, demand an explanation, let my hurt and anger spill out in a confrontation that would likely end with him denying everything, making me feel crazy, and covering his tracks. Or I could do what I'd trained to do for decades. I could document everything, build my own case, gather evidence so thorough, so complete, that when the moment came, there would be no room for denial. My hands had stopped shaking. I felt my mind shifting into a mode I knew well, the same focused clarity I used to feel when I'd find a discrepancy in a ledger, when the numbers didn't match and I had to trace backward through every transaction until I found where someone had made an error, or where someone had been stealing. I made a decision that night I wouldn't confront them. I would do what I do best. I would follow the money. I started with the camera. The next morning, I drove to Best Buy and purchased a small home security camera, the kind marketed to people worried about package thieves. The young man at the checkout barely looked at me. Just another elderly woman buying tech she probably didn't understand. I understood perfectly. Back home, I positioned it on my bookshelf between a photo of Daniel's college graduation and a ceramic vase Emma had made me in preschool. The angle captured my desk, my filing cabinet, and most of my living room. The camera fed to an app on my phone and stored footage in the cloud. When Daniel called that afternoon to confirm Sunday dinner, I mentioned it casually. "Oh, I meant to tell you. I installed a security camera. There's been some break-ins in the neighborhood, and I wanted to be safe." A pause. Then, "That's probably smart, Mom. Good thinking." He didn't ask where I'd placed it. The first test was simple. I took 5 $20 bills and marked them with a pen, tiny dots in the corner of each bill where the ink wouldn't be obvious unless you were looking. I photographed the serial numbers and recorded them in a spreadsheet. Date, denomination, location. Then I placed them in my wallet in a specific order. Sunday dinner came, pot roast, laughter, Emma showing me her spelling test. All A's. I excused myself to use the bathroom, leaving my purse on the kitchen counter like I always did. When I checked my wallet later that evening, after they'd gone home, there were only 3 $20 bills, different serial numbers. The bills I'd marked were gone, replaced with different ones. Someone had taken my money and substituted their own bills to hide the theft. I added the discovery to my spreadsheet. Date, amount stolen, evidence photographed. The pattern was beginning to emerge, but the camera footage was what broke something open inside me. I started reviewing it each Sunday evening, sitting at my desk with my laptop, watching my own life unfold in silent, time-stamped clips. The first incident occurred while I was in the kitchen cooking. Daniel appeared in my office doorway, glanced toward the kitchen, then walked to my desk. He opened my laptop. My password was written on a sticky note underneath, a habit I'd never thought to hide in my own home, and began clicking through my files. I watched him open my bank account, screenshot my balance, check my investment statements, forward an email to himself with my quarterly pension summary attached. He worked quickly, methodically. This wasn't his first time. When he finished, he closed everything carefully, returned the laptop to exactly where it had been, and walked back to the living room where Ashley was reading to the kids. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. last Sunday. I sat in the dark, the laptop screen illuminating my face, and felt tears I'd been holding back for weeks finally spill over. This was real. This was happening, the next Sundays. Footage was worse. Ashley came early again, saying she wanted to help with dinner prep. I was in the kitchen when I saw her slip into my office. On the camera, I watched her open my filing cabinet with a key. My key, the spare I kept in my desk drawer, which meant she'd been through my desk enough times to know it was there. She pulled my property deed and photographed it with her phone. Every page. Then my insurance policies. Then a folder labeled estate planning that contained my will. She worked with the calm efficiency of someone following a checklist. Before leaving the room, she straightened a stack of papers on my desk, and I saw what she'd been reading. Printed articles about cognitive decline. The same ones I'd found scattered on my table. She'd brought them. She was planting them, creating a paper trail of evidence that I was researching my own mental deterioration. I watched this footage 3 times, and each time I felt my heart break calcifying into something harder. On week 3, I caught the conversation. I'd left my phone on the kitchen counter, voice recorder activated beneath a dish towel. I'd told them I was going to the basement to get more potatoes from storage. Instead, I stood at the top of the basement stairs and listened to the device capture everything. "How much longer do you think we need to wait?" Ashley's voice impatient. "The lawyer said we need at least 3 months of documented incidents. We're only at 6 weeks." Daniel's voice, my son's voice, clinical, detached. "She's not actually declining, though. She seems fine." "Doesn't matter. We're creating the documentation. The forgotten bills I've been hiding, the cash discrepancies, the articles about memory loss lying around. It builds a pattern. What if she notices?" She's already doubting herself. I can see it. Last week, she asked me twice if she'd already told me about her book club meeting. She hadn't, but I said she had. You should see her face when I do that. She second-guesses everything now. My hand gripped the stair railing so hard my knuckles went white. Ashley laughed, a sound I'd mistaken for kindness 100 times before. "God, I can't wait to get rid of that floral couch. The whole house needs to be staged completely differently if we want top dollar. First we get her moved, then we list it. The Sunset Gardens contract is month to month, so once she's in there we can—" I made a noise then, some small, involuntary sound of pain, and came up the stairs loudly, giving them time to rearrange their faces into expressions of casual innocence. "Found them," I announced, holding up potatoes I could barely see through my tears. That night, I transferred the audio recording to my laptop and added it to a folder I'd created, Project Evidence. Inside that folder was everything. A master spreadsheet tracking every theft, every incident, every lie. Screenshots of Daniel's searches on my computer. Photos of the marked bills that had disappeared. Videos of them going through my private documents. The application for Sunset Gardens. The browser history about conservatorship. I'd also started tracking something else. Their communication with my family. My sister-in-law, Elena, had mentioned casually at church. "Daniel said you've been having some trouble with your memory. Are you doing okay?" My cousin called to check in because Daniel seemed worried about you living alone. My neighbor mentioned that Ashley had stopped by to ask if she'd noticed me seeming confused lately. They were laying groundwork, building a consensus, making sure that when they finally made their move, everyone would nod and say, "Yes, we'd noticed she was declining. It's probably for the best." I documented each conversation, dates, times, what was said, who said it. I called my brother Tom in Seattle, the one family member I trusted completely, and told him everything. "Jesus, Ellie," he breathed. "What do you need?" "Nothing yet, but soon. When I'm ready, I'll need you here. Just say the word." I also did something I should have done weeks earlier. I called a lawyer, not Daniel's lawyer, obviously. I found an elder law attorney through the State Bar Association, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in financial exploitation and elder abuse. I brought her my documentation, every spreadsheet and screenshot and video file. She spent 2 hours reviewing it in silence, her expression growing progressively grimmer. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Price, what you've documented here is textbook financial exploitation with intent to defraud. The fact that they're actively trying to have you declared incompetent to facilitate access to your assets? That's conspiracy to commit fraud at minimum, possibly worse. Can they succeed with the conservatorship? Not with this evidence. You're clearly competent. You've documented their scheme better than most attorneys could, but She paused, choosing words carefully. "Are you prepared for what happens when you reveal this? This will destroy your relationship with your son." I looked at her for a long moment. "He destroyed it first. I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise." I left her office with a legal strategy and a plan. Every Sunday, I continued to smile and serve pot roast and let my grandchildren play in my garden. Every Sunday, I let Daniel and Ashley move through my house like they owned it, taking my money, photographing my documents, building their fictional case of an incompetent old woman. And every Sunday night, I added to my evidence file. I was building my own case, one they'd never see coming. But the worst discovery was still to come, and it involved my sister Margaret. I discovered my sister's betrayal in a text message that appeared on Daniel's phone while it was sitting on my kitchen counter. He'd left it there to help Emma with her jacket. The screen lit up with a preview I wasn't trying to see, but couldn't unsee. Margaret, did you talk to her about the finances yet? The sooner we move on this, the better. Don't want her changing beneficiaries or anything crazy. My hand froze on the dishcloth. Margaret, my baby sister. Daniel returned and grabbed his phone, eyes flicking to me with quick assessment. I kept wiping the same spot on the counter, my face blank. The moment they left, I went straight to my laptop. I logged into my cell phone account and pulled Daniel's text records. I couldn't see content, just numbers and frequency. He'd been texting Margaret multiple times daily for 2 months. My sister, the one I'd helped raise after our mother got sick, the one I'd lent money to when her second husband left, the one who'd cried about her bills last Christmas while I quietly slipped a check into her purse. I needed to see those messages. It took 3 days to find them. Daniel's text backed up to his email, the same account he'd left logged in on my computer. I opened the folder labeled SMS Backup and started reading. The first message mentioning me was from 8 months ago. Margaret. She's sitting on a gold mine and doesn't even appreciate it. That house could pay for both our problems. Daniel. I know, but we need documented evidence of incompetence. Margaret. I can help with that. I'll start telling people I'm concerned. Coming from her sister, they'll believe it. 8 months. They'd been planning this for 8 months. I scrolled through weeks of coordination. Margaret offering to spread rumors about my memory to relatives. Daniel coaching her on what symptoms to mention. Margaret asking about sale prices. Daniel sending her property comps. Then I found their deal. Daniel. Once the house sells and we settle Mom somewhere permanent, I'm thinking 60-40 split. Margaret. I want $50K minimum. I've got credit card debt up to my eyeballs. Daniel. Done. $50K off the top, I take the rest after expenses. $50,000. The price my sister had put on my erasure. The messages showed her role in detail. She'd been positioning herself as the concerned sister to family members. She told our cousin I seemed confused about dates. She mentioned to Elena, our sister-in-law, the family court judge, that she was keeping a close eye on things. Building a foundation, so when Daniel moved for conservatorship, the family would say, yes, Margaret's been worried for months. Then I saw the jealousy, raw and ugly on the screen. Margaret to Daniel. She always got everything handed to her. Perfect husband, stable job, now this house worth $500,000. Meanwhile, I've been married 3 times and can barely keep my lights on. It's not fair. Daniel. Once this is done, you'll finally have some security. Margaret. Damn right, and honestly, she won't even know the difference. Stick her in front of a TV in some care home, she'll be fine. I closed the laptop and walked to the bathroom and vomited. This was the little girl whose hair I'd braided for school. The teenager I'd covered for when she snuck out. The struggling mother I'd bought groceries for quietly so she wouldn't feel shame. And she thought my life had been handed to me. She didn't remember the years after Robert died when I wore the same 3 outfits because I couldn't afford more. She didn't see the decades of skipped meals, careful budgeting, unglamorous work that built the life she now wanted to steal. She saw a paid-off house and called it luck. The gaslighting clicked into place. 2 weeks ago, Margaret had called asking if I remembered promising to lend her $2,000. We talked about it at Easter, remember? For my car repair? We hadn't talked about it. I'd never promised that. But I doubted myself. Had I forgotten? Now I understood. She was creating a pattern. Stories I supposedly didn't remember. Promises I'd allegedly made, making me question my own mind. At the last Sunday dinner, Margaret had stopped by just to visit. She'd said loudly in front of Daniel and Ashley, "Eleanor, honey, didn't you already tell me this story about book club?" I hadn't, but I'd seen the look they exchanged. Another mark in their ledger of Eleanor's declining mind. My camera footage showed Margaret photographing my bank statements during that visit while I was in the other room. My own sister, helping my son erase me for $50,000. I sat at my desk surrounded by evidence of conspiracy and felt completely alone. Who could I trust? How many others were part of this? I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would tell me the truth. Tom answered on the second ring. "Ellie, it's late, you okay?" "I need you to listen," I said, "and I need you not to tell anyone we talked." I told him everything: the footage, the theft, the conservatorship plan, Margaret's involvement. Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Tom? I'm going to kill him." His voice was flat and cold. "I'm getting on a plane and killing our nephew." "I need you alive and not in prison," I said. "I need you here, but not yet. When I'm ready, can you do that?" "What are you planning?" "I'm going to let them keep digging, let them think it's working, then I'm going to show everyone exactly who they are." "Tell me what you need." Knowing I had one ally changed everything. I wasn't alone. But more than that, I had clarity. This wasn't about money. They were erasing me as a person, rewriting my competence, my independence, my entire identity, reducing me to a confused old woman who needed to be managed, contained, put away. Margaret's text from last week confirmed it. Once she's in Sunset Gardens, we can tell. People she's happy there, better off, getting the care she needs. Everyone will believe it. Confused old people. That's what I'd become in their story. I looked at my evidence folder, hundreds of files, screenshots, videos, audio, financial records, a complete timeline of conspiracy. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. They wanted to erase me, to make me disappear, but I had other plans. Sarah Chen's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I'd lived in my entire life. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'd brought everything on a USB drive: videos, spreadsheets, audio files, screenshots, months of documentation organized into folders with dates and descriptions. She plugged it into her laptop and started reviewing in silence. I watched her face as she clicked through files. Her expression went from professional interest to barely concealed anger. 2 hours later, she looked up. "Mrs. Price, this is the most thorough documentation of financial exploitation I've seen in 15 years of practice." She leaned back in her chair. "Most clients come to me with suspicions and maybes. You've brought me a prosecutable case. Can they succeed with the conservatorship?" I asked. "That's what I need to know." "Not a chance." She pulled up Georgia's legal requirements on her screen. Conservatorship requires clear evidence of incapacity, medical documentation, professional assessments. What they have is hearsay and manufactured incidents. She paused. "When's the last time you had a cognitive evaluation?" "Never needed one." "Let's fix that." 3 days later, I sat in a neurologist's office taking every cognitive test they had. Memory recall, pattern recognition, problem solving, executive function. The doctor was a kind woman in her 50s who seemed almost apologetic about the simplicity of the tasks. When she gave me the results, she smiled. "Mrs. Price, you scored in the 97th percentile for your age group. Your cognitive function is exceptional." I had her put it in writing, notarized, with that day's date clearly visible. Sarah had more news when I returned to her office. "I did some digging," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Your son put down a $5,000 deposit at Sunset Gardens 3 weeks ago. He's reserved a memory care unit starting next month." My hands went cold. "He what?" "There's more." She pulled out another document. "This is the application. Look at the signature." I looked. It was my name, Eleanor Marie Price, in handwriting that resembled mine but wasn't. The loops were wrong. The spacing was off. "He forged it," I whispered. "Yes, and here—" She pointed to a section labeled Cognitive Status. "He's indicated you have moderate dementia with increasing memory loss and confusion. The facility believes you'll be moving in voluntarily with family support." They'd already reserved my cage. "What are my options?" I asked. Sarah's smile was sharp. "Legally, several, but I think you have something else in mind." I told her about my birthday dinner, about my plan to reveal everything in front of the family. She listened, then nodded slowly. "Public exposure isn't a legal remedy, Mrs. Price, but sometimes it's more effective than court." She pulled out a legal pad. "Let's make sure you're protected. I'll prepare a cease and desist letter, ready to send the moment they try anything. And I want you to sign an advance directive and power of attorney designation, naming someone you trust in writing so they can't claim there's ambiguity. My brother Tom. Perfect. Get him here to sign. Tom flew in 2 days later, quietly, staying at a hotel near the airport. We met at Sarah's office and signed everything: power of attorney, healthcare directive, a written statement of my competency and wishes. All notarized, all dated, all legally airtight. When this is over, Tom said as we left, I'm moving back here. You shouldn't be dealing with this alone. That night, I began assembling the evidence packets. I didn't create one massive document dump. I personalized each one. For my father figure, Uncle Walter, I highlighted the financial theft. He'd appreciate the numbers. For Elena, the family court judge, I included the legal elements: forgery, fraud, conspiracy. For my cousins, I focused on the lies Daniel had told about me to each of them specifically. Each packet was printed, organized, placed in a manila folder with the recipient's name on it. I worked at my dining room table until 3 in the morning, checking each document twice. When I finished, I had 23 folders arranged in a box, each one a personalized indictment. The dinner invitation had gone out a week earlier. Please come celebrate my 68th birthday. It's important to me that everyone's there. I'd made it sound sentimental, traditional. Everyone had said yes. Daniel had called immediately. That's great, Mom. We'll definitely be there. I could hear the eagerness in his voice. He thought I was handing him the perfect opportunity. All the family assembled, the ideal moment to announce my transition to assisted living. Margaret had probably already coordinated her supporting statements. They thought they were walking into their victory party. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house at 2 in the morning, touching things. The kitchen counter where I'd made thousands of meals, the living room where Daniel had learned to walk, the garden visible through the back window where my grandchildren played. This house wasn't just property. It was 40 years of my life, translated into walls and floors and memories. I'd fought for it once when the bank wanted to foreclose after Robert died. I'd fought for it again when the neighborhood tried to force sales for redevelopment. I'd fight for it now. The folder sat stacked on my counter, ready. My phone held every backup file. Tom was on standby at his hotel. Sarah Chen had her legal documents prepared. My cognitive evaluation was notarized and official. I'd done everything right. Everything they'd never expected me capable of. The morning of my birthday dinner, my phone rang. Daniel. Hey, Mom, happy birthday. Listen, Ashley and I have some important news to share tonight. We wanted to wait until everyone was together. I looked at the folders on my counter, at my reflection in the kitchen window, clear-eyed and certain. I know, son, I said quietly. So do I. The pot roast was perfect. The table was set with my good china, and 23 people filled my dining room with the comfortable noise of family. I'd placed the folders that morning, one beside each plate, while the roast was in the oven. Manila folders, unremarkable, easy to overlook amid the serving dishes and wine glasses. Daniel stood at exactly 6:45, right after I'd served dessert. He tapped his spoon against his wine glass, and the room fell silent. I know this isn't easy, he began, his hand resting on Ashley's shoulder. His voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognized as performance. But Ashley and I have been talking, and we think it's time Mom moved somewhere she can get proper care, somewhere safe, somewhere with people trained to handle her declining condition. Ashley dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Dry eyes, I noticed, always dry. Margaret nodded solemnly from across the table. I've been worried too, she said on cue. I think it's for the best, Ellie. We all just want you safe. The family's faces turned toward me, waiting for tears, denial, confusion. I took a sip of water and set the glass down with steady hands. Before we continue this conversation, I said, my voice clear and calm, I'd like everyone to look at the folder placed beside your dinner plate. Daniel's confident smile flickered. What folder? The manila folders. I put one at each seat before you arrived. I gestured around the table. Please, everyone, open them. The rustle of paper filled the room. I watched faces change as they began to read. My nephew Marcus whispered, "Holy shit." Uncle Walter's expression hardened as he flipped through pages of financial records. Elena, My sister-in-law, the family court judge, went very still, her eyes scanning rapidly. Daniel grabbed the folder nearest him. The color drained from his face. "What is this?" His voice climbed an octave. "What did you do?" "I documented the truth." I kept my tone level, almost gentle. "Every conversation, every dollar you stole, every time you moved things in my house and told me I'd misremembered, it's all there with dates, times, and video evidence. This is a violation of privacy." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Is it?" I met his eyes. "This is my house, Daniel. My computer, my documents, my money you were stealing, my signature you forged." "Forged?" Elena looked up sharply. I nodded toward her folder. "Page 12, the Sunset Gardens application. That's not my signature, though it's a decent attempt. I had a handwriting analyst confirm it." Ashley stood suddenly, grabbing her purse. "We don't have to listen to this." The front door opened and Tom walked in from where he'd been waiting on the porch. He was 6'3" and blocked the doorway completely. "Sit down, Ashley," he said quietly. She sat. Margaret's face had gone from pink to ash gray. Her hands trembled on the folder in front. "Of her. There's a section about you too, Margaret," I said, starting on page 8 of most packets. "The text messages between you and Daniel. The $50,000 he promised you from the sale of my house. Your role in spreading rumors about my competence to the family." "50,000? My cousin Janine's voice was sharp. "Margaret, what the hell?" I didn't." Margaret's voice broke. "Eleanor, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I stood, and the room went silent. "You thought I was a confused old woman, an obstacle to a real estate transaction. You forged documents, stole my money, accessed my private accounts, and conspired to have me declared incompetent so you could take everything I'd spent 40 years building. We were worried about you." Ashley tried. "You were forgetting things, seeming confused." "I have a cognitive evaluation from 3 days ago." My voice cut through hers like a blade. "97th percentile for my age group. It's in your folder, page 15, notarized, official. My memory is perfect, Ashley, which is how I remember every single lie you've told." Uncle Walter was on his feet now, his face red. "Daniel, you put a deposit on a facility? Without her consent? You told them she had dementia." Elena read from her folder, her voice cold with professional outrage. "You indicated moderate cognitive decline. That's fraud. That's elder abuse. That's—" She looked up at Daniel with an expression I'd never seen her wear. "That's criminal." Daniel's rehearsed speech had completely abandoned him. "Mom, if you just let me explain—" "Explain what?" I asked. "Explain the text where you told Ashley, and I quote, 'She won't even know what's happening until she's already moved'? Or maybe the one where you coached Margaret on what symptoms to mention to make me sound incompetent." The table had erupted into overlapping voices, cousins demanding answers, Uncle Walter loudly calculating the theft amounts, Elena making quiet comments about legal consequences. Through it all, I remained standing calm, watching my son's carefully constructed fiction collapse under the weight of documented truth. "Did you really think I was senile?" I asked into a brief pocket of silence. "I'm a retired accountant, Daniel. I've been tracking numbers since before you were born. You got sloppy because you underestimated me. You saw an old woman and assumed incompetent." Tom moved to stand beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Daniel looked around the table at the faces of family members who'd known him his entire life, now staring at him with horror and disgust. "You wanted to erase me," I said quietly. "Instead, you've exposed yourself." What happened next, I didn't expect, and it changed everything. The silence after my words was absolute, broken only by Margaret's chair scraping as she stood and left without a word, her folder clutched against her chest. Elena was the first to speak. She set down her folder with careful precision, her judge's face locked in place. "Eleanor, what your son did, what all 3 of them did, isn't just immoral." Her voice carried the weight of courtroom authority. "It's elder financial abuse. It's fraud. It's conspiracy to commit fraud. In Georgia, these are criminal offenses that carry prison time." Daniel's face went white. "Aunt Elena, don't." She held up one hand. "Anything you say right now is something I might have to testify about later. I suggest you stop talking and get a lawyer. Ashley stood again, this time with Tom stepping aside to let her pass. This was Daniel's idea, she said quickly, desperately. He said his mother was declining, that we were helping her. I didn't know he was. Page 23, I said quietly. Your text to him about staging the house for resale before I was even moved. Your idea to create incidents of my confusion. Don't lie to these people, Ashley. You're on camera doing it. She left without another word. The family stayed for another hour, but the birthday celebration was long dead. They asked questions, offered support. Uncle Walter wrote me a check to replace what Daniel had stolen, even though I told him it wasn't necessary. Cousins hugged me. Elena gave me her card and the names of 3 criminal attorneys. When they finally left, Tom and I sat in my living room surrounded by dirty dishes and half-eaten cake. You okay? He asked. I looked at the spot where Daniel had stood, where my son had delivered his rehearsed speech about putting me away. I don't know. The texts started that night. Daniel. Mom, please, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Can we talk? Daniel. I never wanted to hurt you. I was desperate. The business is failing and I panicked. Daniel. Please don't shut me out. I'm your son. I read each one and felt nothing but a distant, aching sadness. Ashley filed for divorce within 2 weeks. In her filing, she claimed she'd been manipulated and deceived by Daniel regarding his mother's condition. My lawyer, Sarah, sent me the paperwork with a sticky note. She's trying to salvage her reputation. Don't buy it. The family splintered fast. Uncle Walter stopped speaking to Daniel entirely. Cousins blocked him on social media. Elena made it clear he wasn't welcome at family events. Margaret became a ghost, avoiding everyone. Her promised $50,000 evaporated into shame. Tom found an apartment 3 blocks from my house and transferred his job. I'm not leaving you alone again, he said simply. The hardest part was the grandchildren. Emma was 5. Jackson was 3. They didn't understand why Sunday dinners stopped, why Grandma's house wasn't available anymore. Ashley controlled access now, and while she hadn't cut me off completely, visits were supervised, brief, and painfully awkward. I'd saved my home but lost my family in the process. Daniel tried to apologize in person once, showing up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon. Tom answered and told him to leave. Through the window, I watched my son stand on the sidewalk, his shoulders shaking before finally walking back to his car. Part of me wanted to run after him. The mother part, the part that remembered rocking him to sleep as a baby, helping him with homework, cheering at his soccer games. But the woman who documented his systematic attempt to erase her stayed seated. I'd won. The house was mine. My finances were secure. My competency was legally documented. Sarah had sent cease and desist letters making clear that any further attempt at conservatorship would be met with immediate legal action. Victory looked like an empty dining room table set for one. 3 months later, I received a letter that made me question everything I thought I knew. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in January, 3 months after the dinner that ended everything. The return address was Ashley's lawyer's office. Inside was a single handwritten page. Eleanor, I know you have no reason to believe me, but you deserve to know the truth. It started with Margaret. She approached Daniel last year when his business was failing. She told him you were sitting on a fortune while he was drowning in debt. She planted every seed, coached every move. She promised it would be easy, that you'd be happier in a facility anyway. This doesn't excuse what he did, what we did. But he wasn't the architect. He was desperate, and Margaret knew exactly how to exploit that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just thought you should know. I read it twice, then filed it with the rest of my evidence. It added context. It explained how a good man made monstrous choices, but it didn't change the fundamental truth. Daniel chose money over his mother. Margaret's manipulation didn't move his hand when he forged my signature, or emptied my wallet, or researched how to have me declared incompetent. He made his choice. I made mine. My life now looks different than I imagined, but not worse. Tom lives 3 blocks away and comes for dinner every Sunday. We've restarted the tradition, smaller and quieter. Sometimes it's just us. Sometimes his coworkers join. The dining room isn't empty anymore. I joined a painting class at the senior center, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. My instructor says I have a good eye for color. My landscapes are terrible, but I don't care. I'm learning something new at 68, and that feels like victory. Twice a week, I volunteer at the library's literacy program, teaching adults to read. Full circle back to teaching, but on my terms. The grandchildren visit once a month, supervised by Ashley or sometimes Tom. Emma asks why they can't come more often. I tell her sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that take time to fix. She accepts this more easily than I do. Daniel is in therapy. He sends occasional emails, carefully worded, probably reviewed by his attorney. I read them. Sometimes I respond. Mostly I don't. The boundaries are strict and non-negotiable. He doesn't have my door code anymore. He doesn't have access to my financial information. He won't. Possibly ever. Trust isn't rebuilt with apologies. It's rebuilt with years of consistent, different behavior. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not holding grudges either. I learned that protecting yourself isn't the same as being unforgiving. I can wish him well from a distance while refusing to let him close enough to hurt me again. My house is still mine. Every morning, I make coffee and sit on my back porch looking at the garden Tom helped me expand. The tomatoes Emma and I planted are thriving. The bird feeder attracts cardinals. This is my home. I fought for it. I'm not going anywhere. If you're still here with me, thank you. Telling this story wasn't easy, but your presence made it possible. If you've experienced anything similar, a family member who saw your vulnerability as opportunity, someone who mistook your age for weakness, I want you to know you're not alone. Please, if this resonated with you, give this video a like and comment with the number 1. It tells me you're out there, and that matters more than you know. And if you're fighting your own quiet battle right now, hear this. Age doesn't mean powerless. Experience is its own kind of strength. The hardest betrayals come from the people you'd never suspect, but that doesn't mean you can't survive them. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Set your boundaries and defend them without apology. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve to be treated with dignity, always. Last Sunday, Emma and Jackson played in my backyard while Tom grilled burgers and I pulled weeds from the garden. It wasn't the family I'd imagined, but watching my grandchildren chase butterflies through the yard I'd fought to keep, I felt something close to peace. This is my home, my life, my terms, and I'm not going anywhere.